Colette Lewiner is head of global energies, utilities and chemicals for Capgemini in France, and she joins us now from Paris. Thank you very much for joining us. How much of a challenge is it to get the green agenda up the agenda at the moment, because so many countries seem to be immersed in their own particular crisis, particularly in Europe?
Yeah, I think you're right, it's a real challenge. I may say that the European Union was, if you want, quote unquote, the best in class in that respect, because we have binding objectives to reduce our CO2 emissions by 20% in 2020, to reduce also our energy consumption by 20%, and to have 20% renewable energy in our energy mix. So we started very well. I think the CO2 objective reduction will be met. It's more difficult for the renewable energies because of the crisis and because the funding of those projects will be difficult. And it's clear that the European Union needs to do much more on energy savings. But if you look at that and the crisis we are in, which is a big deficit and debt crisis, the question, and this is my fear, is that the head of states don't have that as in their priority list anymore. It's no longer the first one on the radar screen. It's more economic and debt problems. And for example, I read that there will be no head of states going to Durban, which is very different from what happened, for example, in Copenhagen 4 years ago. So I think there is a need for a real push to have something concrete happening in the Durban conference.
And how close are we to any kind of a new initiative that might push for there to be a legally binding agenda, the way they were very close to getting at Copenhagen?
Yes, but since, if you want, the problem is Europe and now Australia. Australia has joined the club, if I may say, have legally binding objectives. But then, if you want, of course, developing countries, it's very difficult for them. They want to grow, and they say, and they are right, you grow and you emitted CO2. Now, let us grow as well. So they have the developing objective, and they are afraid that CO2 binding objectives would go against it. The US, which is a big country, very big emitter, for 1/4 of the planet's emissions, today they are in the middle of a re-election. Now President Obama is for re-election in 1 year. And I don't believe that he will be able to pass any binding law on CO2 or greenhouse gases reduction. So today the probability to have a binding objective seems low.
Okay. Colette Lewiner, head of global energy, utilities and chemicals for Capgemini in Paris. Thank you for joining us.